Time to say a very good morning to Neil Oliver. I missed you last week, Neil, because I was away getting a bit of half-term R&R on the Isle of Wight. Sorry to say that Jeremy Corbyn seems to have followed in my footsteps, so we'll see how that turns out. But welcome back. How are things?
Hello, Mike. Nice to see you back. Good. I have to be positive. No, I'm refusing to go under any further than I was under, and I'm just trying to be upbeat about all things in the face of all the chaos around us.
Yes, well, when you look at what's going on in America, actually, we can take a little bit of comfort that we're not quite as chaotic in our political system as they are.
I suppose I'm old enough. I've lived through enough American elections and UK elections, but it does seem to be deteriorating in terms of a spectacle that you would want to watch. The very idea, I will always maintain until, much later, that America is the best single idea for a nation that anybody ever had.
Yeah.
I completely approve of their constitution and the ambition of the United States, and that increasingly it's not being made manifest is very depressing, because I always think of America as a hopeful,
yes,
as a great hope for humanity. If we're now in territory where even the Americans can't smoothly conduct, the regular general election to establish their leader for the next 4 or 5 years, then what hope for anybody else? Furthermore, I think in the way that it has happened already, say in Britain, in terms of the Brexit referendum and then the last general election here, it's increasingly becoming the case that the other side, of whatever side you are on, are no longer just the opposition, they are the enemy. Are to be treated as the enemy in terms of the language that's used. And then I always ask, well, what hope for the victors of any election? Because increasingly elections are close-run things now. And if a winning party has to then move on with the idea that maybe as much as nearly half of the population are the enemy, the enemy within, how then do you get anything done?
Yes.
How do we get anything done in our country when so many people are characterised as the wrong kind of people and the enemy within? And likewise in America, what hope for a society to get things done, to move forward constructively, if they're talking about each other as the enemy?
And I've always worried about America. I mean, when I moved there in 1983, I was moving from a Britain that was kind of coming out of the 70s. It was the beginning of Thatcher's first few years of her reign, and it was not in a great place. The economy was in the toilet. There weren't very many jobs. One of the reasons I went to America, and it was the Reagan era, and it was that shining sepulchre on the hill that Ronald Reagan talked about, and it was a land of opportunity. And London and Britain became that same land of opportunity in the 80s. But, America then seemed to me to have everything right that Britain had got wrong. It seemed to me to be a place where, there was more technology, there was more opportunity, and there was more wealth and ability to make money and to make a life for yourself. But now it seems as though we've sort of gone and overtaken them, and we've now become far more technologically adept. Britain has become slightly more in the forefront of science, perhaps, than America. And I've always worried that too many lawyers have clogged up America's political system, and they've all now found excuses for why we haven't lost, if you know what I mean.
I agree that I fear for, I think lots of people are fearful for and about America and what will happen to America in the future. I grew up, like everybody of my generation, my only idea of America was that which I had from the movies and television series. And it wasn't really until I was in my 30s and my 40s that I actually had the opportunity to see much of America. And when I did, and I was in the southern states of America in the summer before the 2016 election, and I was shocked by the state of towns and villages that I was seeing in those areas. The infrastructure was subpar, to say the least. There was a lot of anger, a lot of anxiety. It wasn't a happy place, and I was struck by how the real America that I was seeing was not at all the America that I had seen portrayed in the movie. And also, like everybody else in the run-up to the 2016 election, the majority of the media and the pollsters had been predicting the win for Hillary Clinton. And I was speaking to people down there in Georgia and Alabama and Tennessee and the Carolinas, and they were all saying, absolutely not, Trump's going to win. And I was shocked and stunned because it was at such variance with what I had been hearing before I came out to America. And sure enough, I went home, said this to people, and then the election unfolded, and indeed Trump won. And I think what the America that we think we know, I think the America that most Brits maybe think they know, it doesn't exist. We're familiar with those, the eastern seaboard and the western seaboard and those big, California and New York and all the rest of it. And when you actually get the opportunity to go into the United States of America, you're confronted with the reality that in many ways it's many different countries.
Yeah.
And there's an enormous range of people, and there's an enormous range of opinion. So much so that it's dizzying and disorientating. It's so different is it from the version of America that we've been to get here. And I very much, yes, that we do. I think in many ways we seem to have taken a step ahead of America technologically and in certain ways. But I fear for America because the world needs an America, or at the very least needs the idea of an America, the idea that we've always had of America. And that seems to be disappearing almost like a mirage.
I think that's right, because you've spoken before, Neil, about how it doesn't take very much for, kind of instability and dissatisfaction to turn into something a lot darker. And we were seeing last night already crowds gathering outside the White House, instances of people getting into sort of shoving matches and shouting at one another. And I do worry that is going to be something we see more and more of as this kind of stalemate continues and maybe leads to some kind of battle royal in the Supreme Court.
It almost feels here in Europe and in America, I think it's fair to say that there's a feeling that people are beginning to treat democracy with contempt, almost as though too many people are now thinking that what we've had and the way we've done things in the past is no longer to be treated with respect, and in fact is to be treated with contempt. And that's a very dangerous cocktail, because that can be manipulated by bad actors, who want to channel that feeling of discontent, because bad actors and political movements and ideologies can take advantage of that kind of feeling of unrest and contempt for the status quo, such that people begin to say, well, anything would be better than what we've got. And just change for the sake of change would be an improvement. But the reality is that the options, the choices that are other than what we have had are not good, and the rest of the world for most of history has been a hellish place for most people. And this, we've said it before, what we've had in Britain and what has been there in America for a relatively brief period in the scale of humankind. It's so fragile, and if people lose it, they won't necessarily. Too many people won't see what they've lost until it's gone. And I look on at America, and my heart breaks for it. It's supposed to be the land of the free. It's supposed to be about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is such a noble aspiration, even though it hasn't been properly fulfilled yet. It's something that's so worth reaching for. And if people treat with contempt what we have and just want change so that they can have the excitement of a revolution and this, and a so-called reset, then I do fear for the future. And what happens in America, if a country like the United States of America can't smoothly conduct its elections and establish who it wants to lead for the next 4 years, then what hope is there for the rest of us?
No, quite. And my last guest on the overnight show was a former aide to Joe Biden who had fought on behalf of Hillary Clinton and Al Gore, and he was kind of third-time loser last night as I was talking to him. But he was an interesting character, I thought, which kind of delineates what's going wrong, because he talks about Donald Trump being a purveyor of hate and somebody who hated everybody else, and that he didn't agree with me that the left should not fight back against him, and in the light of this hate crime bill in Scotland and what the Law Commission is looking at now down here in England as well, the definition of hate now seems to be something that the left is going to tell you about. It doesn't seem to be that the definition of hate is in any way open to, shall we say, any kind of argument or any kind of debate. They're going to tell you what hate speech is, and you're going to have to make sure that you don't make it. Otherwise, you're going to end up in prison.
Hate is such a powerful word to be using in that in a legal context. To have where laws are being drafted and written and bills are being passed through parliaments, I think hate is the wrong word to be using. And there's always the possibility of drifting as well into one-party states. Yeah. And if you're a one-party state, and that unchallenged, unopposed state is able to define what is hate and who is doing the hating and who is doing the stirring up of hatred.
Yes.
That's so terrifyingly dangerous. For so long, when the hate crime bill was just at the proposal stage here in Scotland, it was being opposed across the board by the police, by spokesmen for the legal profession, by all sorts of people, by the creative industries. All sorts of people were standing up and saying this simply cannot be allowed. And you used in your introduction there, when you're talking about what we were going to talk about, you raised the spectre of Stasi, and we've said this before. How on earth have we got, in my lifetime, even just the last few years, to be contemplating that what people say in the privacy of their own homes is to be policed and prosecuted? What has happened to the notion of your home being your castle?
Yeah.
There being some place where you can just be yourself, think your private thoughts, discuss things with your family, free from censure, free from prosecution, that we're contemplating getting into an idea where, and how would it be policed?
Right.
Are we seriously considering encouraging members of a family to inform on the other members of that family in the way that happened in East Germany with the Stasi? So that by the end of the regime, 1 in 4 people in East Germany was a Stasi informer. Do families, do parents have to live in fear of their children? Does brother have to live in fear of sister?
Well,
it's for a civilized society is that?
Well, it's a small step from that as well to justification for, say, bugging people's homes and saying, well, if we have to wipe out this kind of thing, it's a bit like Father Ted, down with this kind of thing. Well, who says what this kind of thing is? Who defines it? I mean, I'm looking at a piece in the Mail today, Roddy Dunlop, who you'll know is distinguished Dean of the Faculty of Advocates in Edinburgh, saying, do we really want to live in a world where saying all Scots are stingy is somehow a banned phrase? You can't say it. He says, is it threatening? No. Is it insulting? Maybe, but do we want to criminalise that sort of thing? And who's going to decide?
Yeah, there's plenty of testimony that you read about in the former Eastern Bloc. That the people, ripped the wires. There were lines across people's walls where they had, once they were set free from that regime, they tore the wires out of the walls that had been there, that had been the tracking, the bugging devices that had been there. And of course, now in the 21st century, there's plenty of technologies that you'd be free to speculate might be used against you.
Yeah.
In a world where what people discuss, what mums and dads discuss with children, and what brothers and sisters discuss with one another, might become the substance for a case against them. And who once you say that, if I have been offended, I've been offended just by what you said, what you thought, or the books that you have on your bookshelves.
Yeah.
It becomes hypothetically the case that if you've got a Bible in your house or on your bookshelves, that depending on another person's point of view, that could be a document that seemed to stir up hatred because of certain phrases and verses and chapters within. It's such an open-ended, nebulous concept that you can go to the police and say, my feelings are hurt because that person has stirred up hatred by thinking what he or she thinks. We'll all be in the courts forever.
Right. Well, I mean, this was illustrated very well, and not to his advantage, I don't think, by this Democrat advisor, who basically was demanding the right to do whatever he wished in response to hate, so that therefore you can burn down Portland if you are angry enough, if you're hurt enough, if you're upset enough, because you're justified in your being upset because somebody has hated on you.
I've been a contrary figure over the years, and I completely respect the right of other people to not agree with what I say.
Yeah.
And well, let's imagine they don't agree with what they think I think. But likewise, there are many people whose thoughts and their virtually their every spoken word, you might say, it causes me upset or offence, but I just accept it.
Yeah.
I just accept that is normal, and I'm so dedicated now to the concept of free speech and free expression that I would prefer to go towards the side that says anyone can say absolutely anything.
Yeah.
If we were to be offered a choice between what is potentially enshrined within a concept like the hate crime bill that's proposed for Scotland, and on the other end of the spectrum, freedom to say and use any words and to express any opinion, that's the side I would take. I would rather see that extreme end of the spectrum than the other. Yes. Because I can take, spoken hatred, sticks and stones and all that. Sticks and stones will break your bones, but I refuse to contemplate living in a world where I would even think of taking someone to court because of something they said that I thought was hateful. It's just not. We have protections. We have laws about defamation. We have laws about libel. We have laws about slander. And we have all for a long time learned that there are certain things that if we do and say certain things that there will be consequences.
Yes.
But to ratchet that up to the point where you're saying that what someone says in the privacy of their own home should be the grounds for a case that you'd see them go to jail for 7 years, then that's dystopian to me.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. People do have a kind of confusion over free speech, though, because some people will say things to me like, well, I thought you believed in free speech. Why are you telling that person that what he's just said is libelous? And I'll say, well, free speech means you can say what you want. It doesn't mean that there isn't a consequence to what you say. But I guess the problem with that argument is that in the end, if in fact the government is going to limit what you can say by legislation, then that unfortunately leads down a very dark path indeed, because where does that end?
Well, it ends in what we've all seen. What we've all seen in the past. What has happened in totalitarian regimes in the past, where any group that seemed to be in the wrong as far as the state is concerned, can be victimized to the nth degree. And if the state uses the law to make opposition to its political stance and anything else that's associated with that, then you're basically just stamping down on opposition. It simply becomes the case if you've got a powerful, one-party state, then the right to say anything against them could be interpreted by them or by their supporters as an attempt to stir up hatred. And so for everyone, for most people, the safest path is simply to say nothing. Yeah. That no matter what the ruling party or the ruling body says, you just think, no, I've just got to keep my head down, because if I say that I think that's a bad idea, that could be interpreted as stirring up hatred against the party, and I'll end up in jail. It's all of it. It's not about. Well, in essence, it's about freedom of speech and freedom of expression. But ultimately, when it's top down from a government, it's about stamping on the mere possibility of opposition. And in a free society, you're obliged. It's not just a right to challenge authority. You're obliged to keep authority in check. That's in the nature of checks and balances.
Well, exactly right. And I've always questioned why politicians, and it always happens to politicians who start to think that they can never be voted out because they're so popular that everybody wants them there. And they then forget that they're actually elected by us to represent us. And they start pushing us around, which is what's happening now with the pandemic, which is what's happening now with the restrictions and the lockdowns. I mean, as London and the rest of England goes into a lockdown tomorrow, I'm actually not even sure where you are in Scotland. I'm not sure whether you're still in one, whether you're coming out of one. Where are you vis-a-vis where we're about to go?
Well, we've got these. We're about to embark on this the 5 tiers, which, confusingly enough, are numbered from 0 to 4. I live in Stirling, which is in Forth Valley, which is the filling in the sandwich created by Strathclyde and Glasgow on one side and Edinburgh on the other. That's the main centres of population. And although the numbers of cases of COVID that are here in Forth Valley are quite low, because we're in that filling in the sandwich between the two, we've been lumped into this tier three. I think we're tier three at the moment in the old system, in old
right.
money. But which basically means I can't leave sort of Forth Valley, or I can't leave my tier three area to go into a less infected zone. Everything's shut, the pubs are shut, and all of that. We're in those restrictions. But I wouldn't want anyone to take what I've just said as gospel, because like you, because it keeps on changing, and because I don't listen to the restrictions day by day, I could easily be out of step. But to go back to what we were saying about the hate crime bills that proposed here in Scotland, and now what's telling me is you're looking at it down in south of the border as well. It seems all part of a dangerous piece to me, because when we look at America and the election at the moment, and ever since Hillary Clinton and our talk of a basket of deplorables, this migration that there has been, this evolution where it's been deemed appropriate to hate the opposition and to regard fellow citizens as the fifth column, the enemy within. And both sides are doing it, and it's certainly being pushed by media. It's being encouraged. Certain things have been taken as the norm. All this talk about shy Trumpers, because even husbands aren't telling their wives, and wives aren't telling their husbands if they're going to vote Trump, because there has been such a stigma has been attached, to that side of the campaign. It's become, that polarization has definitely already crossed the line into the dangerous place where we're treating fellow citizens as the enemy. Now, whoever wins this election, if Trump ends up staying in the White House or if he's replaced by Biden, the country can't move, because I've said it before, it's like a light aircraft with a dead elephant strapped to one wing. It can't fly. It can't go anywhere, because you've got this sullen, angry, disenfranchised, nearly half of your population that have been invited to regard themselves as the hated ones. And they'll be so disinclined, I would have thought, to put their shoulder to the wheel, to try and affect any meaningful change. And it is exactly the same situation that we're increasingly in the UK, where people on one side of the argument hate and treat as near criminals the people who hold the other point of view. And it creates a complete deadlock, a complete stasis. How can we get anything done as countries if half of the population in every country hates the other half?
I know. It's quite bizarre. It's quite ridiculous. And thank goodness that you and I can talk about it at the moment, because there's still no law against speaking out against it. Neil, as ever, thank you very much indeed. We're out of time, but we'll speak to you again same time next week. Neil Oliver, making an awful lot of sense, as ever. But even he is a little bit confused about what tier he's in Scotland, as I'm sure many of you will be, as to what you can do come tomorrow. After today, when you finish your shopping at Curry's, and other electrical stores, of course, are available, what are you going to do for the next month? This is Talk Radio.